Welcome to a celebration of the life of Alan Thrift, Thrifty. His son Michael, brothers Kevin and Ivan, and his extended family and those planning the service are grateful to you all for coming. Thanks to all those on stage who have joined together one more time in a massed choir to make music in honour of the maestro. So, we will sing, we will listen, we will smile, we will laugh, we will weep. We will say goodbye for now to a sparkling-eyed man who did all those things in such style. Do you remember his dark glasses worn at the countless funerals, where his voice and his music always brought comfort to others, even if the price was his own tears, camouflaged by dark glasses? So, we do our best today, dark glasses or not, to smile through the tears, to laugh, and to celebrate the legacy and ongoing impact of the maestro, our dad, our brother, our friend, Thrifty. We are privileged to be led later in a reflection by Pastor Don Bain, colleague of Alan on the Avondale faculty, friend over many years. Don returns to honour Alan as he honoured Yvonne 20 years ago in this very place. We commence by singing one of Alan's favourite hymns, chosen by him for this occasion, Immortal, Invisible, God Only Wise. Will you stand and join the choir in singing?
us remain standing and pray. Our Father, the creator of the music of the spheres and the giver of talents, we are grieving today at the loss of Alan, a father, a brother, a mentor, and a friend, and one who lifted our souls with his musical interpretations. We are told that to everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under the heavens. There is a time to be born and a time to die, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. O God, lift our hearts today with our great memories of Alan, his life, his music, and his love, and help us to remember that there is no night without a dawning, no winter without a spring, and beyond the dark horizon, our hearts will once more sing, thinking of him as living in the hearts of those he touched. For nothing loved is ever lost, and he was loved so much. Amen.
So where do we start in celebrating this life? Everyone here would have a favourite memory, a favourite story. And if we had the time, we'd love to hear them all. But time is fleeting and we had to make hard choices. One choice not hard to make was to hear from Avondale's leader, Professor Ray Roenfeld. He does not often appear at funerals to say farewell to Avondale faculty members with 40 years of service. He doesn't often appear at funerals for people who've lived over 70 years virtually in the shade of those Avondale jacarandas outside College Hall. So, to reflect on Alan Thrift's contribution to Avondale College of Higher Education, I invite to the podium its president, Professor Ray Roenfeld.
Thank you, Lyle, and good afternoon, everyone. I have to confess that I didn't ever sing in a choir conducted by Alan. So just so I won't feel entirely lonely, I'm going to ask how many of you here today have never sung in a choir conducted by Alan? I want to see your hands. There's actually very, very few of us. So we're the lonely ones here. Avondale College of Higher Education has been well served by Alan Thrift and by his wife Yvonne, who predeceased him 20 years ago in 1996. Having both been students here, they came back with their family as a team to Avondale in 1957 and took music to new heights and opened broader horizons for staff and students alike. Staying on staff, Alan stayed on staff all the way through to 1957 to 1990. Alan contributed to the process of crystallising Avondale's core values in the following ways. Firstly, his commitment to the value of the performing arts. Secondly, his commitment to excellence. And then thirdly, his determination to mentor students among the rising generations of young people finding their way to Avondale to tertiary study and to birth an awareness about musical and artistic culture. In future years, as we at Avondale continue our journey towards university status, we will look back with enormous gratitude to the foundational work of people such as Alan Thrift, for his commitments are as up to date as tomorrow. They are even more relevant to tertiary education now than in the 1950s when Alan first expressed them on this campus. Avondale has recognised Alan's enormous contribution to the college. Alumnus of the Year in 2011 and then Master of the College in 2015. Beyond the campus of Avondale, Alan left a very significant mark on the life and culture of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It is due in large measure to his influence that this relatively small Australian Christian denomination and small college punches well above its weight in terms of musical literacy and musical appreciation of its members, and in terms of their ongoing contributions to the musical and cultural life of Australia. Others will speak of Alan's impact on the wider community, but let it be known that Avondale College of Higher Education and the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which supports it, are profoundly grateful to Alan Thrift for his contribution to their growth, their maturity, and their impact on Australian life. Rest well, Alan. Rest well, Thrifty. You have set the world to singing.
There are not many present who can recall those earliest days a family coming from rural New South Wales to quaint little Cooranbong in the 1930s. Not many who can remember Alan, the boy in short pants making magical music on a village church organ with pedal bellows. But Kevin Thrift is one such person. How privileged we are today to be given a look into the precious places of the heart reserved for family. Kevin Thrift is Alan's brother, and today he offers memories and reflections.
Let's get this one. Thank you, Lyle. When Alan was about 6 years old, he rescued Ivan and me from drowning in Dora Creek. Alan didn't tell me about this until many years later, but when he saw how impressed I was, he subsequently enjoyed reminding me. This simple story tells me so much about Alan. Ivan or I were in the water when we probably shouldn't have been. Alan was standing on the bank taking care that nothing happen to us. And when he saw we were in difficulty, he ran to the person who he loved the most and trusted the most, and that was our mother. My mother ran to the lake. She waded in and dragged us out. And when I think of that, I think that he was Alan. He wasn't the one in the lake or in the river, I'll get it right, the creek. But he was standing there watching over us to make sure that we were safe. I mentioned he loved his mother, who was a very special part of his life, and she was the one that recognised early on his talent. She was a wonderful woman in her quiet way. She was very intelligent, warm-hearted, sensitive, emotional, and she had a subtle, verging on wicked sense of music, of humour, and she loved music. Who does that remind you of? Alan was very much like his mother. He enjoyed practicing the piano and listening to music, while Ivan and I liked playing games. A hobby of Alan's was raising bantam chickens. Playing with our dog and riding his bike to school were his main physical activities. Despite these differences between Alan and his brothers, he was possibly the happiest and most thoughtful of the three boys and posed the least problems for his parents. When I saw in that presentation, musical and visual presentation about Alan, I saw him conducting the Messiah. Once, about 60 years ago, to my misgivings, I accepted his invitation to sing the tenor solos in a performance of the Messiah. I hope none of you were there. And if you were there, I hope you've forgotten. I was not a true tenor, and to my great embarrassment, I missed a reasonably high note in one of the solos. Alan was a perfectionist and must have been dismayed, but he never showed it. Later, he gave me a hug and said not to worry, that my other solos were very good. In no way was Alan going to hurt my feelings. That was one reason why I loved him. During Yvonne's final illnesses and after she died, Andrea and I spent much more time with Alan, eventually moving to Lake Macquarie for about 5 years. As he gradually recovered from the tragedy and with support of his many friends, he began to enjoy life again. We had many happy times together, and with his friends, among whom were Russell and Jan Gibbs, who we not only became our friends but also our neighbours. In 2002, Alan and our mutual friend Graham visited us in France. Alan was well and happy and great company. He was a hit with our French friends, even those who spoke little or no English. His winning smile won their hearts. Many, when we see them, remember him after all those years, and that really pleases us. Alan had many, many friends who cared for him. On behalf of Michael and Ivan and other family members, I would like to publicly thank you all, though I cannot name you all. However, we must thank Lyle and his team for organising this memorable event, and also to mention a very special lady who Alan trusted with power of attorney, who selflessly cared for his needs and spent countless hours at his bedside during his last few months. We will never cease to be grateful. Thank you, Pat. I hope you heard that, Pat. To his extended family, Alan was in many ways central to our lives. We were all drawn to him and consequently to each other. We will miss him.
We shift gears. Just for now, we speed past Alan's youth and college study, past his marriage to Yvonne, past his induction as a father to Karen and Michael, and into his career at Avondale. Some of the most impressive things said and written about Alan have come from students he mentored, people who truly believe that he made a life-changing impact on their lives, that he opened doors for them that have led to amazing careers of their own. Doors opening into the future as upcoming generations also developed a love of musical arts, a passion for excellence, and a determination to share widely the skills and inspiration that Alan set in motion. With world-class ensembles of their own and with impressive careers in music and in academia, James Bingham and David King are two such people. We are privileged to hear from them now. James comes to us from the USA via video, while David, with professional involvements in both Australia and the United Kingdom, is here in person. We hear from James and then from David.
I am profoundly grateful that our paths crossed starting in 1963 when I entered Avondale College as a first-year education major. I was green behind the ears and very shy at 17, and it wasn't until I found a support system in the Avondale Symphonic Choir that I started the long process of maturing under Alan's tutelage. Many and varied were our experiences in that choir, but the net result was that it sent me in a new direction, that of emulating Alan by becoming a choir director myself. Simply put, Alan changed the direction of my life. Through the years, Alan made comments about the similarity of our directing style and skills, and I took this as a profound compliment. My admiration of him as a musician, choir director, and teacher was so high that I treasured any such comparison. However, the most enviable of all Alan's traits was his infectious ability to make friends, to empathize with people, and to make light of situations that would bring others to tears. That is, with the one possible exception, when we were all thrown off stage for singing What Shall We Do with the Drunken Sailor at Avondale College. In this area of rapport, Alan stood head and shoulders above us all. Alan was simply a friend to everyone. Alan and Yvonne visited Janelle and I a number of times in the US. One of these occasions, he brought the Avondale Singers to perform for the 1990 Indianapolis General Conference session. Both of us were directing choirs on that occasion, but whereas I diplomatically tried to excuse the general chaos and abysmal sound system, Alan hit the nail right on the head by declaring the exercise to be the most amusical and awful experience of his entire professional career. It was this type of honesty that endeared him to me and to many others. This past August, while visiting friends and family, contacting Alan was one of our top priorities. However, this time, all joking was put aside as we all instinctively knew that we would not be seeing each other again in this world. His hugs, kisses, and many words of kindness and love, this time spoken with a deep sincerity and resignation not always characteristic of Alan, became the inner music of our hearts as we left him at his Currumbong home. The very last memory was his affectionate wave to us as we pulled out onto the road. As I drove off, and as Janelle shed many tears, I began to consciously thank God for the privilege that had been given to me in finding my life's calling thanks to this dear friend. He may now be at rest, but his life and the music that he created will be a testament written in the annals of many hearts and institutions. While his music was great, his friendship was even greater. Dear Alan, may you rest in peace until the morning of eternity, and may God bring comfort to us all.
The Padre mentioned 1957 as the year that Alan and Yvonne Thrift moved here to Avondale. It was also the year that the second child of Ted and Helen was born. That's myself, David. And from that particular year, I think I was only 3 months old when I was introduced to Alan. I didn't know who he was at the time. Little did I realise the impact that big smile would have on my life. Whoever put that photo together for us today, by the way, I have no idea who did that, but that is magnificent, isn't it? What a shot. I loved it when the choir was being directed by their current maestro and Alan was looking across there with his nod of approval while the choir was singing. Fantastic. So at an early age, I was one of many of the kids in Currumbong that fell under the spell of Alan Thrift. And I was talking about it with my father, who also passed away this year, Michael, 10 months yesterday. And I said to Dad, the first thing you've got to do when you get up to the Holy Gates, I'm not sure whether you're going to get in, you have been a bit of a naughty boy. I said to Ted, my father, but I said, you're not going to be alone because Thrifty tells me he's only got a couple of years to go. He may not have had a couple of years, it was only 10 months. But I said to Dad, if you get through the gates, the first job you've got is to make sure the brass section at least is in tune for Alan when he arrives. Oh, how Alan Thrift hated the noise of brass out of tune. And I suppose I had that combination of my father and Alan at the same time. One loving passionately brass, and Alan loving passionately brass played well. And the community was blessed by both. Well, I've had over 50 years, I've had 60 years of Alan knowing me, and probably from the age of 10 I started to get closer to Alan Thrift, or Mr. Thrift as it was then, because he was teaching Kadai and Orff methods though I knew nothing of Hungarian education methods. Alan himself did. He'd studied them and he was testing them, as he did, on his students. And I was only 10 years in primary school, just across the way when the primary school was just 100 metres from where we're here today, gathered in honour of Alan. And he was teaching a percussion band there, and there was percussion, and he also taught recorder. And I asked him, "Excuse me, Mr. Thrift, could I bring my trumpet?" He said, "Don't bring that." He said, "They're loud, horrible instruments." Alan always had a wonderful way of making all of us feel terribly important. Or as my mother said to me this morning, "Yeah, more terrible for some of us than others," she said. He had a wonderful way of making everybody feel incredibly special in the special moments we had with him. I know that the congregation here is packed full of talent, and I said when I was asked earlier, I decided I don't think I could talk anyway. I'm a little raw from earlier this year with the passing of Dad, and I said I really would like to pass up on this wonderful opportunity of a tribute, which I did. But Jean Baskin being as persuasive as only Jean can be, I'm standing up here talking with a quavering voice as if I'm not only illiterate but also incapable of addressing audiences, which are both quite right. I actually said this morning to my mum, it's going to be packed full of people with great talent who've travelled the world and done things a long way away from home, and some very close to home. And the great thing about it is not only is everybody talented, but we've all got our own story, as the Padre said a little earlier. We all have our own story and memories of Alan, and I could look at my high school career, and I could look, thrown out of high school in fourth year to be rescued by Alan when Karen started the choir, and he asked me to pull my act together, sing in the choir, which I wasn't quite sure whether I could do, but he kind of rescued me in my fourth year of high school. That was the first rescuing experience from Alan. And then when I almost bombed out of school, my mother pled with him not to let me go to the sinful city of Sydney to study at the conservatorium, but to teach me the ways of music here at Avondale. So I was, I suppose, from 1957 through most of my early life, I was here in this little village, which I thought was the centre of the universe. And of course it is. And Alan, I suppose, impacting on all of us, we could all say, we know somebody who's famous, we know somebody who's great, but every single person who's here, no matter who we are, whether that be Professor Bingham, myself, or each and every one of you, we all know we are nothing more than secondary, I suppose, in relation to the primo experiences that we've had with Alan Thrift. We're nothing more than supporting acts. Nothing more. That's a true maestro. You're very quiet, so I need to say something funny. I don't know what to say that's funny, but I'll say this. To talk about his constant driving for perfection, everybody knows that. His unquenchable thirst for excellence, you mentioned that. What about fueling the fire with the fear of failure? The dark glasses he mentioned at the funerals set me off on that. Fueling the fire with the fear of failure. Yes, Alan knew that. I've seen Alan shake and quiver. I've seen him break out with the choir in New Zealand on tour. Kingsley, you remember? Terrible rash at the time. We wondered what was going on. But the guy pulled it together. And the thing is, I think his fear of failure is the very reason he never did. Never ever. He always made it magic. And I regard his musicality as musically menacing and musically magical. Thank you, Alan.
The song says, "Friends are friends forever," and certainly Joy Mitchell, Kingsley Wood and Harry Halliday feel that way about their connection with the Thrifts. Combine friendship with those years and years of musical sharing as choir members, and you distill a relationship that's worth celebrating and worth hearing about. Joy Mitchell forged a connection with the Thrifts as an Avondale College staff member, while Kingsley Wood and Harry Halliday took the journey through choir experiences to deep and lasting friendship. We hear first from Joy and then from Kingsley and Harry.
Today is a celebration of Alan's life, but for me, it is a celebration of both Alan and Yvonne, because they were inseparable. Theirs was a partnership in every respect, and they complemented each other in every way. They not only created music together, they loved entertaining and were wonderful hosts. My recipe book is filled with dishes gleaned from meals I enjoyed in their home, and Alan, with his artistic flair, always made sure the table setting was just right. When my husband Graham Mitchell was appointed to Avondale to head up the Department of Commerce, a new world was open to me. I was not a student who revelled in Thrifty's music classes, nor was he my mentor, but he introduced and included me in every aspect of the performing arts here at college. Yvonne became my closest friend. We sang side by side in the choir for almost 30 years, and as well as solo work, soprano duets were our specialty. She was the sister I never had, my best friend and confidant. In life, we often need that one person outside of family to whom we can share our concerns and innermost thoughts without judgment. That was the friendship I had with Yvonne Thrift. When we left Avondale and moved to the Northern Rivers, for me it was a bereavement. My friendship with Von and Alan and involvement in college life were very difficult to leave, and I always seemed to wend my way back south for anything special. There was always a bed for me in their home, and Alan kindly included me in the choir's much anticipated tour of America. During Yvonne's illness and her numerous days in the sand, it was not unusual for me to be woken by the telephone at 1, 2 or 3 a.m. It would be Von wanting to talk in the small hours of the morning when she felt so alone and frightened and just needed a friend to talk to. Yes, I too have mourned the loss of my friend for 20 years now, but Alan had lost his right hand and soulmate. He still had his music, but it was impossible to fill the void that she had left behind. 2 months ago, while on a short visit to this area, Graham and I called to see Al. He had been quite ill in hospital but was home again in his unit. The TV was on. I knocked, and a very familiar voice said, "Come in." I carefully opened the door and just put my head inside and asked, "Do you remember me?" The greeting I received was overwhelming. Hugs, kisses, more hugs, more kisses, and continual murmurings, "Joycey, babe, Joycey, babe. How wonderful, just like old times. You still look the same. You remind me of my Evie. You and Evie, they were such good times." It was as if, in an instant, he had her back again. Reflecting on those wonderful times together, I am reminded of a quote about grief. Grief, I have learned, is really just love. It's all the love you want to give but you cannot. All of that unspent love gathers up in the corners of your eyes, the lump in your throat, and that hollow in the part of your chest. Grief is just love with no place to go.
Harold and I will share some moments with Thrifty, some things that he liked, some things that he absolutely hated, and some things that he loved. We'll share those with you.
We remember Thrifty. He was a true musician. First of all, he really controlled. He knew the sound that he wanted. He wanted to achieve that sound and could really inspire and cajole people to get it. He was legend at being able to wither anyone with his death stare. And if that didn't work, he would cut people down verbally, without a question. But more often, he inspired with an iconic smile or a well-done hand signal.
I can remember Harold. He used to absolutely take delight in embarrassing me in the choir. I must tell you that I wasn't invited to join the Avondale Singers. I had to ask to be part of the Avondale Singers. In fact, when I auditioned, he said, "Well, you can go and sing in the chorale." I didn't want to sing in the chorale, so I said, "Oh, don't worry." I said, I won't bother at all. He said, "Oh, well, hang on." And he said, "Well, come and try out anyway, see how you go." And that's when I started singing the Avondale Singers. But he used to love Harold making me embarrassed. I used to I still do, embarrass very easily. And I'd go red from here up. And I sat in the front row or the second row, and he would say things to me that off I'd go. And he'd just sit and laugh. This is in front of the whole choir. That was Thrifty.
My wife's audition was great like that too. He told her that she was a really good mimer. He really performed. He was a performer. He could be feeling ill or angry, but as soon as he lifted those magical hands that he conducted with, he went into a different zone entirely. He would be full of nerves, as David said on some occasions, well before a performance, and you would wonder how he could continue, but no one would ever know as soon as he got onto that stage, Kingsley.
You're right. And he absolutely insisted that we all watch him. We had to watch. And if you didn't watch, he would bawl you out and he'd pick you out. Watch! That's the way he'd treat us. And if we sang a wrong note, it'd be... That's what it was. What's that?
I didn't sing any of those, Kingsley.
No, of course not. Of course not. You're perfect, Harold.
Thrifty had musical taste. He had the knack of being able to choose repertoire that was out of the ordinary, varied in style, and of a quality that stretched his choirs, but he always knew what was appropriate to the occasion as well.
But he didn't like people questioning his choice of repertoire.
No, not at all.
Not at all, Harold.
Thrifty was a teacher and a mentor. He organised student trips that I remember to the Opera House, where I learnt to love Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, Grieg, and many other greats. We would all sit in the cheap seats that were the choir seats right behind the orchestra, because he just enjoyed watching the conductor there too, and he didn't like to part with a penny.
The only time I remember going to the Opera House, apart from concerts, I went for a HMS Pinafore one year. And we went there, and he just loved it, especially the little guy that was running up and down and making a nuisance of himself. And he was always just wanting to go back and see that again and see that again. He loved it.
He would never use language that was over the heads of students in order to impress. He would rather describe what was needed to get us to where we needed to get to. You know, he wasn't out to impress or anything like that. It was just pure, let's get to there.
But after a concert, Harold, he was very impressed if people were impressed.
Indeed,
yes.
He loved that.
Yes. He loved the fact that people enjoyed the music. He just loved it that people really loved the music.
One of the things I really remember about his choirs is the way that he managed the learning time, Kingsley. You know, at the end of a choir practice, you would look back at the session thinking, wow, how did we get through all of that? You know, he was just amazing at being able to get through a practice without being draconian and even making it a fun thing.
Yeah. He would insist on going over parts with each of the choir members, and if something got it wrong, he would just go over and over and over till he got it. And woe betide you if you got it wrong next time we sang it when we were all together, because he said, "We've already done that. What's wrong with you? You know, you better come and see me later." And sometimes some of us had to sit with him later and actually do parts practice on our own.
Thrifty enjoyed people and he enjoyed life. He really noticed you. He could not only talk to you, but he listened and could see behind what you said and even what you didn't say.
I'd say that Thrifty was also from time to time what we might call a matchmaker. And he would be trying to, what do you think that'd be like? Karen and I are a result of his matchmaking experience. And it's worked out not bad, has it, Karen?
He wanted to know anything of interest about you. He liked gossip, but rarely let any of it out, which made him a great confidant to many people. In fact, I remember one year at college, he was voted by the students in Watson Hall as being the most likely lecturer that people would go to if they were in trouble.
Yeah, if you're in trouble, go to Al, because he would listen. But more than that, he would stand up for you. And that was a good thing about Thrifty.
Thrifty was always dying, Kingsley.
Yeah, yes, always dying.
Ever since his first major angina attack, which I think happened in 1975 out at the beach here, he would regularly tell me he was at death's door.
Yes.
Or that he could leave the world at any moment. Or even that he'd seen the angel Gabriel when he had last had a nap. So it wouldn't be long now.
Yeah. I remember when he turned 50, it was the worst experience of his life. He went into a state of depression for about 6 months, and he really hated turning 50. 60 was a lot easier to get over than 50. But I remember visiting him in the Wyong Hospital just a few weeks ago, and he couldn't understand or respond very well. And I said, how are you, Al? What a silly thing to ask people when they're not well. But anyway, how are you, Al? What's happening? I think I'm dying. And I said, oh, really? I said, you're looking not too bad. Oh, why is it taking so long? You know, he was gruff. He would never have wanted to be found in the situation that he was in. He always used to tell me, I don't ever want to go there. So I said, well, we don't get a choice most of the time.
Alan had a great sense of humour. He enjoyed being naughty, in fact. For example, he would contend that there were no calories in cream on the Sabbath day. Practices were very, very rare where he didn't find fun in something or even someone, Kingsley.
Yeah, that's true. However, we did also find sometimes to have fun about him. I remember a choir practice one time, Harold's early Sabbath morning practice. I think it might have been before grad. For grad, we were there early to practice. And somebody looked down at his feet and he had odd shoes on. And the reason for the odd shoes was that he'd gotten up dark, and so he didn't wake Yvonne. He tried to choose, shoes to wear, and he obviously got the wrong set. So we used to pick up, I remember another time, Harold, when he was conducting us very madly. This was in Coffs Harbour, I think, Joy. And he had a cough lolly and it came out of his mouth. And it stuck on his stole. And he was trying to get it off like this. We could see it, the audience couldn't, and we were cracking up.
It was one of the only times, Kingsley, where the choir actually collapsed.
We collapsed in laughter because it looked so funny.
And he was mortified at that. Yes. The show had to go on. He had a few hates, Kingsley, didn't he?
Oh, he had hates, yes. David mentioned one of them before. Brass instruments that didn't keep in tune. We'd practice with trumpets sometimes for a piece we were doing, and if they couldn't get it right, it was almost more than he could bear. He couldn't stand trumpets that couldn't get every note right. Not just most of them, but every note. That's one of the things I remember. He hated people being late. Absolutely hated. In fact, when we went on tours and we had to get a plane, Harold, I don't know whether you remember, he always used to arrive at the airport about 2 hours before the plane went.
Yeah, he was like that.
He was like that. And you weren't going to be late. You weren't late for choir practice and you weren't late for a performance.
You might be late once, Kingsley.
That's the last
that was
time.
It, yeah.
Yes. Didn't like sickness either, Harold.
He didn't like sickness. No.
He hated people being sick. You had no reason to be to not attend a choir rehearsal or a performance unless you're in bed and had a doctor's certificate. That's about the only reason that you had for not being there.
And he hated people who did things that made themselves sick too, Kingsley, didn't he?
Yes. I remember in our choir tour, you weren't with us in America, but
No.
Pete Lindsay was. He was one of the culprits, actually. Pete Lindsay was out there with a group of guys playing basketball in the dead of winter with, just T-shirt, freezing to death. And then they wondered why these people were getting sore throats and getting sick, and he couldn't stand that. Oh, talking about being late. I can remember one person he left behind once in New Zealand, Corny Cesare. Anybody remember Cornelia? He left it behind. She had this massive red case, left it behind. We got to wind up, Harold.
We do. I'd probably just like to mention a couple of other times, Kingsley, where the choir collapsed because they were so rare. One of the ones I remember was when Auntie Joy Mitchell was on tour in Queensland and her high heel fell down in the crack between two boxes that she was standing on. And she gracefully collapsed behind there and then arose again. And his look on that, conducting us in the middle of the song, was absolutely priceless, Kingsley, but we couldn't continue.
No, the choir just cracked up.
And the other time was on tour in New Zealand. I remember we were singing the song Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. And imagine his surprise when two wags were at the back of the choir, took out water pistols and shot over the choir onto him. For some reason it just didn't continue. Look, Thrifty was a friend. He was a compatriot. He's already missed.
Yeah, very much missed.
The choristers in front of us today understand full well everything that was just said. They're determined under their director, Alita King, to do homage to Alan's memory and bring you notes of inspiration and encouragement. They bring us an arrangement of It Is Well, another hymn Alan wanted us to experience at his funeral. Longtime friend Graham Wilson, as well as being a fine musician, is a recording engineer of superb skill. For a perspective on Alan's music heard through a microphone and a perspective on travelling on the road with Alan, we welcome his friend, Graham Wilson.
Thanks, Lyle. It's 1976. We're in the Chatswood studios of the ABC. Conductor, producer Eric Clapham is in charge, and over the intercom, Alan and the singers hear Eric say those magic words, "Standing by." The singers had already made one professional recording. They'd made television history by, I think, being the first choir to perform on Australian television. But this 76 recording was the first year in which I was involved. Alan's wide range of repertoire on that day included the spiritual My Lord, What a Mornin', Edward Elgar's haunting part song, My Love Dwelt in a Northern Land, Aaron Copland's setting of the old American song Ching-a-ring-a-ring Chaw, and my personal favourite on the day, a Baroque cantata, Jesu mein Freude, by Dietrich Buxtehude. I think Michael Rigby played the harpsichord that day. There were many recordings after that, and I was personally involved in at least 20 of them, including a compilation in 1997 that marked the centenary of Avondale College, and it featured the Avondale Singers and some restored recordings of the symphonic choir. Whether in the recording studio or in a church or in a concert hall on tour, Alan's charisma and his attention to detail that others have mentioned was appreciated by all. And a star cast of musicians over the years happily accepted invitations to perform with him. Singers like Marilyn Richardson, Pearl Berridge, Grant Dixon, wind players such as Don Burrows, Mark Walton, Andy Firth, and we mustn't forget David King, and string players like Tony Benetti and the Collins family, including Errol, Doralyn, and Susan, just to name a few people. There are many, many others, as you'd know. Organist Michael Dudman, who at the time I'm speaking of, was Dean of the Faculty of Music at the University of Newcastle, once commented to me when he and I were on tour recording in Canada. He was referring to the Avondale College music scene under Alan Thrift at the time, and he said, you know, there are really very good musicians out there. And coming from Michael, that was a telling accolade from one of this country's top musicians and educators. Alan had a fantastic, easy way with people. He loved to laugh, and regardless of age differences, people enjoyed his company. He preferred being around others. He'd ring me sometimes, he'd say, I'm bored. And I'd be the sort of person who'd think, I've got some time to do something. Alan would be on the phone, I'm bored. So, of course, you'd go and have coffee. He preferred to be around others, but despite this apparent ease with other people, I think he had an inherent shyness that might explain why he was nervous about being interviewed. I tried many times to get him on the air with me. And then one day, he said, oh, all right. Very grudgingly, he came into the studio, and his comments on that day gave me a great insight into the man and his music. One of my first questions was, why choirs? What do you enjoy so much about choral conducting? And he said, and I quote him, there's nothing that surpasses the human voice as an instrument. In conducting a choral ensemble, in contrast to an instrumental ensemble, the choral conductor has the added interest of the text. And then you have to interpret the words in terms of the stylistic requirements of the period. You have the challenge of developing a blend of voices, and of course, there's always the fun of the social aspect, with 50 or 60 interesting people with a common aim of all making wonderful music. And that's what he brought with him to all of his choir tours: fun, camaraderie, great music, and musicianship, and he was always on time. Never started to practice late, except one, but we won't mention that. The choir, he said later on, when he retired, from conducting the Sydney Male Choir for 20 years. They had a function on in Sydney to farewell him. He said, "Don't forget me," which we never could. But he said one thing in his speech he gave that could sum up his relationship with all of his choirs over the years. He said, "The choir is like a wonderful instrument, like a great orchestra or an instrument that I can play. And I love playing you," as he looked around the room. "Tuning you up when you're out of tune, adjusting this and that. I love doing it. It's a great honour to conduct choirs. It's the best." Alan Thrift.
When Jean Bass Coffey and her daughter Victoria think of Alan, they describe him as a person with no use-by date. Think about that one. The family found in Alan a friend who was timeless, as happy in the coffee house with the teenagers as with the mum and dad. To celebrate their enduring friendship across the generations, we welcome Jean and Victoria Coffey.
We didn't play musical instruments, but I had met Alan many years ago and I thought him a rock star. I was at school with Michael and David King, and many years later, just after Yvonne had passed away, we saw each other. He was conducting a choir in Newcastle and it was just an instant, we became best buddies. We adopted him, he became part of our family. And he would come into my factory. And you're probably wondering what the link was. I wasn't a musician, although I appreciated everything that he did and all the enjoyment. But he realised I made a different kind of music. It was out of silks and linens and tapestries and precious fabrics. And he realised also the power that really good things are made, not in isolation, but in collaboration. So he was very interested in all my staff. The seamstresses, the tailors, the pattern makers and the cutters. He knew them all by name and would take time to chat to them. A different world, but in many respects similar. We loved talking about the creative process. I remember a time when Victoria turned 16 and I was suggesting to him we were going to have a beach shack party. And I was a little concerned with security. Alan knew how he could fix that. A trusty son, Michael, who was a friend from ever, was going to be my security guards. And true to his word, Michael, Ackermax, resplendent on 2 Harley Davidsons with his friend Stevie, in absolutely compulsory leather tuxedos, turned up at our party at Merewether Beach on the foreshore. He's smiling. We had no gate crashes, not a single one. But Michael rewrote ID history that night. I went downstairs and there's a line of parents and Michael's standing there demanding they show their IDs before they could get their 16-year-old children back. It's so wonderful to see you, Michael. We catch up often. I also think of a time when my son, William, so Alan would dance at our New Year's Eve parties. They called it the Alan rap. He would tap his right foot and he would conduct invisible orchestras to whatever music my children were playing and their teenage friends. And we just loved him. But Billy said to me one evening, "You know, Mum, if something terrible happens to you and Dad, I would like very much for you to nominate Alan to be our adopted dad." And I sat there telling Alan in great pearls of laughter, just imagine you being a footy dad, going to footy training every Wednesday evening. Very silently, he looked at me and he said, "You know, that is so honourable. That is the most precious thing that somebody, a 13-year-old boy, should nominate me worthy. I'm so honoured. I feel so loved." Today, Alan, you are honoured, you are loved. I wish you were here to hear this. I so wish you were here.
So you may be sitting in your church pew wondering who this young upstart is. And when I tell my friends that one of my best friends is in his 80s, they often watch my face waiting for the punchline as well. But Alan was the punchline for me. He's been in my life for as long as I can remember having a life. And for that entire time, he's made me laugh until I cry and cry until I laugh. One early morning, I made my way to St. Martin's Place in the cool of the still hanging on dark night. The thick timbre of the Sydney Male Choir rolled across the building fronts as a digger's gentle tear mapped his weary face. I raced towards Alan when the crowds eventually fell away from the Anzac dawn service. I threw my arms around him and hugged him tight. As I stood to one side, I watched these wonderful gentlemen hold his hand and bow. "Thank you, Mr. Thrift," they'd say. "Very good job, Mr. Thrift," they'd nod. And suddenly it occurred to me that Alan had a double life. He'd convinced all of these people he was responsible and sensible. And ever since that day, my darling Alan, I have threatened you with this one. For years I've taunted him with telling all of our tales. As soon as I get on that stage, Thrifty, I'm going to tell him everything. "Don't you dare," he'd giggle and tickle me in my side until I gave in. "I'm going to tell them the way you demanded. I go and tell that young thing to cover up so you could enjoy your tea. I'll tell them about your fits of giggles that we would have to hide at funerals, as a very well-meaning singer would sing every note off key. You were outrageous, you were cheeky, you were funny, you were irreverent. We had a friendship that never once recognized the many years, every now and then I'd point out it was decades, that lived between us. You played piano to the sound of my grandmother's voice. You kicked my mother Jean's voice out of your choir. Lack of discipline, he always said. And you stuck around to meet my voice and to teach me what it means to have a voice. And above all, use it to make the sound of laughter. You, my dear friend, taught me about the kind of serious silliness it takes to make a life. As I stand in this beautiful church today, and it's absolutely packed, Alan, you'd love it, and the flowers are just like the displays at David Jones, and there's not a single person singing off key. But as I stand here today, all those adventures that we had have become more precious somehow. They're mine, and they're ours to hold. So rest easy, Thrifty. I won't be dobbing you in today. At least, not yet. You are a giant. You are my maestro. And my life is just beginning. Every time I close my eyes, I will link my arm with yours as we waltz down the street singing and laughing and looking for the kind of trouble that only we knew how to get into. So my dearest Alan, as you would always say to me at the end of a very good time, good night, gorgeous. I'll see you in the spring.
Finally, the Sydney years. Norma Rosenhain, long-time friend of Alan, exclaims how his choirs featured in some of the most profound and precious experiences of her life. Winston Eldridge struck up a friendship in Sydney, and Alan found a second home with Winston and the male choirs of Sydney. And finally, a choral tribute is offered by the Sydney Male Choir and the Men's Shed Chorale, a song that all those who knew and loved Alan and Yvonne will love again today. Alan asked that this music be heard today again as he softly leaves us.
As a teenager, the most inspiring thing for me in coming to college was singing in the Avondale Symphonic Choir. And I think that's because Alan really did know how to make everyone feel very special. In later years, Alan and I reconnected in Sydney. As patron of the Sydney Male Choir, I really enjoyed to listen to them singing and to see Alan continuing his conducting career. He was the heart and soul of every choir. He had a passion for perfection and an intensity of feeling that brought out the best in every one of us. Alan has always been there for me. It was not 3 weddings and a funeral for me. It was 1 wedding and 3 funerals. Alan and the Sydney Male Choir made my marriage to Trevor, the funeral of both of our fathers and my mother, really memorable musical events. And most recently, the Men's Shed Chorale sang at the dedication of the Rosenhain Healing Garden at the Sand, which I built in memory of my mother and for the benefit of the patients. And I can see Alan now standing in the midday heat of the sun, outdoors, still giving it everything he had. The haunting, the beautiful, the sad song that lingers in my memory through all of these events is Softly As I Leave You. But I could never bring myself to imagine that it would be Alan that was leaving us, and the choir would be singing softly in memory of him. Goodbye, my dear friend. You have inspired so many of us, and we are missing you already.
What do we say when we are affected by a life-changing event? Almost every person in this building today can say they have been touched by the Thrifty's art for his music. He was, to all of us, a master of his teaching and possessing the X factor in music interpretation. His style and intellect towards his musical approach has been unsurpassed in our lifetime, with his ability to masterfully guide us through many interpretations of our choral music. Don't we all have a story to tell about the experiences of auditioning for Alan over the years? But we won't go there, will we, Anthea? So Anthea Halliday had a beautiful story about that at Alan's 80th, so we'll keep that for another time. Most of us all indeed experienced being under the frightening baton of Alan while being members of the famed Sydney Male Choir, now in their 103rd year of existence, during his 20-year tenure as musical director until his retirement in 2010 at the age of 80. During this period of 20 years, Alan was given us an understanding of technique and confidence and his standalone tuition. His expert leadership ensured that this choir was highly regarded and were consequently in high demand for concerts locally and on numerous overseas tours. The decision was taken by the committee of the Sydney Male Choir for his retirement to coincide with the main event of the year, the 2010 Sydney Town Hall concert. This would be Alan's final concert. A new appointment was made for Dr. Houston Dunleavy to be Alan's replacement, and the handover would be at the Town Hall afternoon concert. Alan had arranged a full-on bells and whistles program for his own farewell, and with the introduction to Houston being in place. However, Alan was hospitalised with heart problems on the day, and he missed the farewell, and Houston's introduction was a premature entry to his newfound choir. It has to be said that Alan had so swell-versed the choir in those chosen songs which Houston conducted, but it was Alan's tempo, Alan's phrasing, Alan's approach, which we sang on the day. The farewell was very successful, although Alan was nowhere to be seen. We let him rest for 12 months before we realised that he was happy to be approached to lead a choir of retired singers of the Sydney Male Choir and formulate yet another choir which would be a little less stressful for him to conduct. He was in. We made mention of a series to our men, and the choir was formed with the unlikely name of the Men's Shed Chorale. Alan indeed hated the name. Not classy enough, but we thought it symbolised the very ideal of who we now were. A group of men who, well known to each other, who can continue fellowship together to share their passion for the very musical trade he had taught them over the past many years. We established the Men's Shed Chorale, and Alan was back in his glory, slowly getting used to the name. He often remarked amazingly how this new choir of old blokes, which the average age of 80, I'm not, but they are, gave him reason to extend his conducting life and gave him a daily purpose for his music interest. Now at 85 and almost 5 years on, his health was in decline once again, and the new choir had become a challenge to him. He was not enjoying his early morning train travel to Sydney fortnightly for mid-morning rehearsals. At this stage, he didn't want to let the choir down in any way, now with 28 singers. And he had to be convinced that his health was paramount and the choir would search for another brilliant replacement for him. He knew that it would be difficult. He would have even preferred it would be impossible. He loved that sort of talk. A replacement was found, and he has worked with the choir now for all of 2016. This year we held a farewell lunch for Alan at the local Wyong Golf Club, attended by the entire choir and their wives, but this time Alan was present, you'd like to know. Our last experience with Alan will go down as one of our most memorable moments. It was the last concert that Alan attended at the beautiful St Peter's Anglican Church in East Maitland, September this year. He was aware that his replacement was receiving praise from all quarters. Not that he was, for one moment, doubted anyone's appraisal of Kieran Brandt-Sordy, our new 23-year-old who had recently received his Masters in Conducting at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. Now he was curious and had to check this one out for himself. Kieran, are you there? Stand up, my boy. We can call him boy, he's only 23. Today is, although he's risen the age bracket of the choir, today is his 24th birthday. He's the youngest thing on stage. Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, Graham. To his delight, he found the technique and style of Kieran's conducting was as if he had handed himself in choosing his replacement. That'd be right. Alan was charmed by this young man, and he sprang out of his chair at interval and indicated his total approval as he was handing over the baton himself to the new successor. It was a moment we all enjoyed. And the satisfaction of having Alan's approval was gratifying. As it turns out, sadly Alan passing was prior to his knowledge of Kieran recently being appointed also musical director to the Sydney Male Choir, and he would have been pleased at no end. So, thank you, Alan, for your tuition, your knowledge and your life with us. This happens all the time, don't worry. Nolene and I will be missing you at your stays at Sylvania, where you considered our home to be your home and away from home. We certainly enjoyed your friendship, covered with many conversations there, as we made our way through many topics, solving most of the world's musical and political situations. Rest in peace, my friend, with the knowledge that we will maintain quality always in our music. and stretch those vowels as we sing through the phrases, always with you on our mind.
Tributes have flowed in media, social media, and by word of mouth. Tributes in this very sanctuary include the display in the foyer created by Russell Gibbs and his team, the display on stage by floral designers Jean Bass Coffey, Rosalie Needham and Rosalie Rickards. Among the oldest of Alan's living friends is James Cox, past president of Avondale College. James is 91, living in Orlando, Florida, and he sends his sympathies to Alan's family and friends and best wishes to the Avondale community. At the conclusion of the service, the nominated pallbearers will escort the casket to the foyer, where it will proceed to the Avondale Cemetery. There will be a private interment later this afternoon. You are all invited to refreshments in the foyer, where there will be further opportunity for you to sign guest books and to make your own tributes and to share memories. Rest well, Maestro. You have set the world to singing.
I didn't stagger up there because I've been imbibing too much. It's just age. There's several things that have been said about Alan today that have been very informative. One is his amazing ability to take something that is well known and to change it and twist it and make it more beautiful. I'm reminded of the great Isaac Stern, the Jewish violinist, who probably one of the greatest violinists this world has ever known. And in a commentary on him I heard on television some time ago, this musician said that Isaac Stern left no tone unsterned. And I think possibly, from what we've heard today, Alan was a bit like that with his music. He was able to take choirs, take people who perhaps seemed to be unlikely singers in their own right, and turn up something that was truly wonderful. One thing that hasn't been mentioned about Alan is that he was a religious man. Now, if Alan heard that, he'd roll over. If there's movement in the coffin here, you might notice. But Alan actually was a very religious man. And you might say, well, how could that be? We've heard about his escapades socially. But what about the spiritual side of Alan? The word religion is an interesting word. And to some people it's a heavy-duty word, a conservative word, a pious word. But if you were in the 4th century AD and you'd been with Augustine, you would have found that to Augustine and his fellows that religion meant to bind together. It came from the Latin religare, to bind together. We know the word ligature. Those of you who are in the medical profession, nurses or whatever, know that when you get a cut or wound, it needs to be stitched up. A suture needs to be put in a ligature. The wound will not heal without the ligature. So, same with religare. Without religion, there is no healing. And Alan was very much into healing, and we've heard here from many people that Alan was into mentoring. He was into guiding, into encouraging, into taking people who he thought were neglected and building them up. Some years ago, J.B. Phillips, who is known to some here, he wrote letters to young Christians after the Second World War, when spirituality was very low in England, and young people, if they did want a spiritual experience, couldn't understand King James English, same as it is today. And he wrote, J.B. Phillips, wrote the New Testament in language that people could understand. He was a priest in the Anglican Church and has made a tremendous contribution to Christianity. And these are a few words from J.B. Phillips. He said, "If I thought that the Christian faith was only concerned with church-going or looking after a pious minority, I should have very little use for it. But it isn't. Christianity is concerned with the whole of life, from falling in love to the way you bring up your children, from the use you make of your money or talent or the way you treat your neighbour, from the mystery of birth to the mystery of death, and with everything that happens in between. The Christian faith was a way of life long before it became a religion. It still is. You cannot take a certain portion of life and call that religious any more than you can give God an hour or two on a Sabbath and consider the rest of your life your own." Now, this is the important part about Alan. The way you live, the way you treat others, these are the important things, whether you profess to be a believer or not. For the way in which we behave is an accurate indication of what we really think about God. Alan Thrift obviously touched the lives of many people. It was a tender touch, I never did have the opportunity of being in one of his choirs, but I did have the opportunity of socialising with him on many occasions. I'm probably one of the few people here in this church today who can claim to have smitten him between the eyes with a badminton racket and almost ended his career right then. But I think he was ministered to by Chubby Moles, who's also known to some of you here, a man who went to the same acting school as Robin Williams, or so it seemed, Lyle. And we had a great team. Alwyn Salem, Kakos, Chubby Moles, Alan and myself regularly playing on a Tuesday night badminton. So you didn't know that. Alan was quite an athlete, considered for the Olympic Games, but not for long. But a man of so many talents, but his greatest talent, as has been said many times today, was caring for people. And music, with that beautiful gift of music which he had, he was able to bring delight to so many others. I'd just like to leave you with one text. It comes from Paul's letter to the Colossian church, and it says this: "Then put on the garments that suit God's chosen people, his own beloved." And this is the things he says for us to put on: compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience. Be forbearing to one another and forgiving. Where any of you has cause for complaint, you must forgive as the Lord forgave you. To crown all, this is to crown everything, there must be love. And bind it all together and complete the whole. Love bound together. Alan was a religious man. He knew how to bind, he knew how to suture, he knew how to draw us together. And we are thankful for his life. Perhaps the greatest tribute we can pay to him is to emulate some of these qualities that he had of love and tenderness and being together. Robert Fulgham, who many of you have read his books, all I need to learn, learned in kindergarten and books such as that. Robert Fulgham, is one of his 10 points at the beginning of the book, says, "When you go out in the world, hold hands and stick together." And that's what we need to do, folks. As we go from this church today, if we're going to remember Alan, let's try to live like him. Let's hold hands, let's stick together, and let's show what true religion is.
You stand as we sing.
Praise
maestro has laid down his baton, but the music still sounds in our hearts. Speak to us all through the music. Speak peace and comfort into hearts that are sad. Speak hope and courage and commitment into hearts that are tempted to give up. Speak of joyful anticipation as we look forward to the sea of glass and to the music of heaven. Watch over the resting place of Alan Thrift. Watch over his son, Michael, his brothers, the extended family who miss him so much. Unite us all in hope and in the final realisation of all our hopes in the bright dawning of eternity. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Amen. Please be seated.